Hello everyone and welcome. My name is Roberto Corona. I'm an Italian anthroposopher and astrologer, and in this video we're going to talk about the next new moon in Scorpio on November 20th, a very intense moon that represents a powerful activation of Mercury retrograde and which presents us through the image of the Pentagram, the complex impulse of the redemption of the forces of Mars. And in this regard, this moon fully embodies the forces of Scorpio, involving them also on a stellar level. And in fact, we're also going to talk about the star Antares, the star located in the very heart of the starry image of the Scorpion. This is the chart of the new moon in Scorpio. Let's start, as always, with the latest changes in the sky. On November 6, Venus entered Scorpio, whereas, as you know, on November 9, Mercury turned retrograde and will stay retrograde until November 29. You can watch my video about it in the description box down below. On November 11, St. Martin's Day, Jupiter went retrograde, whereas on November 19, Mercury entered Scorpio, joining the luminaries in the chart. And as you can see here, Mercury is in very close conjunction with the new moon in Scorpio, and it's almost in Cazimi, meaning that is almost in the heart of the sun. And this is because Mercury is just 30 minutes north latitude, and this means that we could have had Mercury inside basically the solar disk. But alas, that's not the case. That would be an extremely rare and fortunate placement for Mercury, but this is just a combust Mercury. So this moon will accompany us towards November 30th, the first day of Advent season, which, like every year, takes place under the zodiac sign of Sagittarius. Now, in general, this is a new moon, meaning that it represents the beginning of the process of manifestation of the life forces, the etheric forces of the Earth, which gradually increase with the moon up to the full moon. And in this sense, the new moon is a cosmic seed. It is a good time to sow and start new things. And the culmination of this process will be the next full moon in Gemini on December 5. So let's now take a look at the chart. Sun and moon are at 28 degrees Scorpio and 11 minutes in the starry image of Libra. As you can see, we have the scales here with the two plates, right? And as we said, it is in a partile conjunction, meaning exact to the degree with Mercury retrograde. It is also very interesting to note that the Sun, Moon, and Mercury, they are basically conjoining right on the midpoint between Venus and Mars. So we have Venus is here, Mars is here, and we have the midpoint, so the point that is in the middle between the two here. And we have Sun, Moon, and Mercury, all three together, sitting on the Venus-Mars midpoint. And this suggests a search for balance between Venusian and Martial forces, as we will see. Martial forces that, however, are definitely prominent in the chart, since not only does Mars rule the new moon, it is a new moon in Scorpio, which is a martial sign, but Mars is also in Sagittarius, conjoining the star Antares. Now, Antares is this star here. It is placed in the very heart of the starry image of the Scorpion, and the name Antares means the antagonist of Ares, and Ares is Mars. So, surprise, surprise, is a martial star. Now, the tensions in the chart are mainly represented not only by the challenging star Antares, but also by the conjunction with Mercury retrograde and by the opposition. As you can see, this is an opposition with Uranus placed at 29 degrees and 29 minutes Taurus. that in turn is in conjunction with the Pleiades. As you can see here, we can zoom in. These are the seven sisters, the Pleiades, and this is Uranus. So Uranus is in conjunction with the Pleiades as well, and this is a challenging placement. On top of that, the overall shape of the chart definitely stands out because, as you can see, the chart is featuring a pentagram figure, a pentagram configuration, because we have, on the one hand, the minor grand trine between Uranus-Pluto and close by 2 sextiles. This is called a minor grand trine between the 3 generational planets. On top of that, we have Neptune in conjunction with Saturn. They are both back to Pisces. On the other hand, we have a so-called mystical rectangle. This is a mystical rectangle. So as you can see, Sun, Moon, and Mercury on the one hand, and on the other, we have Jupiter in Cancer. They are making a trine aspect, and they are closed by 2 sextile aspects by Uranus and Pluto, and this is a mystical rectangle, but this is an upside down pentagram. And please note that this is not something that is going to stay like this. So this is not an upside down pentagram because it flips basically every 12 hours. And this is important to highlight since the reversed pentagram is a bad symbol, and this is not the case because the sky is moving. Like in 24 hours, we have all the planets and stars rising and setting and so on. And so this figure in 12 hours is just going to flip upside down. So let's talk about the meanings of the chart now, starting as always with the physical significations. Now, from a material standpoint, Scorpio is all about finance, the stock market, and so on. And since Uranus is back to Taurus, and Uranus is also on the Pleiades, this moon could also involve, in particular, cryptocurrencies or other forms of virtual money. However, since the moon is ruled by Mars, we need to look at that planet in order to understand specifically what issues are at stake. And Mars, as we mentioned, is in Sagittarius, and this means that it is in a zodiac sign that represents policies of military expansion, because Mars rules the military and Jupiter rules Sagittarius. Jupiter is the planet of expansion, and Sagittarius with this arrow is all about expansion. So this means that these financial issues are related to military policies. But we can also say, given the conjunction with the star Antares, that these could be, I would say, explicitly colonialist policies, because this is a malefic star, Antares. So basically, we have here military dynamics linked to territorial border issues, these borders are very weak. So this weakness of the borders, this is represented by the conjunction between Saturn and Neptune here. They are both back to Pisces, and Pisces from a physical standpoint brings chaos and borders that are not very steady, right? Now, the figure of the pentagram also involved by trine, as you can see, Jupiter. So we have Jupiter making 2 trines, one towards these weak borders and on the other towards the new moon. Now, this means that basically we have with Scorpio the investment and financial signification mixed with military campaigns represented by Mars, and on top of that we have Jupiter in Cancer, and Jupiter is in the zodiac sign of nationalism. So basically we're dealing here with large-scale structural investment plans, right, that involve nations currently at war. So putting everything together, this is what we get. Now, in general, we can say that this new moon mainly involve fronts with disputed borders, such as the weak and not entirely effective truce in Gaza, where, by the way, such economic interests have been made explicit in a contract, in an agreement, right? As well as, of course, the situation in Ukraine, and now, last but not least, the so-called Operation Southern Spear by the United States against Venezuelan narco-terrorists that, according to geopolitical experts, is basically an excuse to military occupy Venezuela. And remember, in the sense that the Saturn-Neptune conjunction here between Pisces and Aries comes with the signification of war on the seas. And we can see that also if we look at China and the Taiwan situation, right? From a more individual perspective instead, so on a more personal front, and I would say on a much smaller scale, we could experience in general personal boundary issues, which may concern our private property as well as real estate issues. And please know that Mercury retrograde is in opposition to Uranus in the late degrees of Taurus, and this means that these dynamics could lead to misunderstandings because of Mercury retrograde, and for this reason it is very, very important to prevent any possible, I would say, communication issue, right? But Uranus in the late degrees of Taurus is part of the Taurus-Scorpio axis, so this is definitely something that has to do with money and with our land. Now, last note, Uranus is on the Pleiades and Mars is on Antares, and they are both very challenging stars that could bring earthquakes, if not even natural disasters of other kinds. So please keep that in mind. Moving on to the psychological meanings of the chart, Scorpio energies are demanding us to confront our own shadow. In the video on Mercury retrograde between Sagittarius and Scorpio, we discussed how this is a favorable moment, a favorable season, November, favorable month for transforming the martial shadow in particular. And this was because of a long conjunction between Mercury and Mars. But with this moon in particular, we have an activation of Mercury retrograde because this moon is happening right on Mercury retrograde, activating it. So here we have specifically, technically speaking, this is the inferior conjunction between Mercury and the Sun. But back to the martial shadows, they are indicated in the chart, of course, by this Mars in Sagittarius. And Mars in Sagittarius as a shadow aspect can definitely represent a desire to dominate others with a greedy and insatiable pulsion that seeks to expand at the expense of others, subjugating them, and with Mercury retrograde, even possibly deceiving them. So the opposition with Uranus in Gemini, again, is pointing us to the most likely the trigger of all this rising of these shadow aspects that are, again, money, right? But this is not important on a soul level. On a soul level, we are called to face these shadows, confronting them, to really understand them and healing them. Lastly, from a spiritual perspective, the new moon is placed on the starry image of the scales. Here it is. And in astrosophy, this constellation represents the manifestation in us, human beings, of the forces of Christ. So the forces of Christ from a stellar perspective are here in the opposite constellation, the Aries constellation, also called the mystical lamb. But in the constellation of Libra, in the opposite constellation, we find the manifestation among us, human beings, of these very forces, the forces of the Son of God. So the appeal here is addressed specifically to us, to humanity. And how does this relate to the scales? Well, Rudolf Steiner represented the incarnate Christ, so Christ incarnated in a human body as the so-called representative of humanity. So he is representing us. And he is representing us precisely with an image of spiritual balance. And this image is basically the balance between two impulses of evil, the Luciferic forces and the Ahrimanic forces. Basically, in a nutshell, Ahriman is the god of materialism and darkness, whereas Lucifer is the god of the false light, of false spirituality that is trying to deceiving us and basically making us fanatics of spirituality that is not real, right? Now, basically in the chart, we are pointed towards a form of imbalance here. There is an imbalance of some kind. So which kind it is? So we can look at the moon in order to understand which imbalance we are talking about. And this is the line of the ecliptic. The moon, as you can see, is in the southern latitude. So basically the moon is lower in regard to the ecliptic. And so the moon is pointing at this plate, and this plate is the Ahrimanic plate, basically. So we have an imbalance, we have an excess of Ahrimanic forces that must be balanced and purified. In fact, up until now, we have been talking primarily about Ahrimanic issues. We have money, borders, war, we have colonialism. These are all materialistic and Ahrimanic impulses. Now, the balance is brought about through a spiritual impulse which has to do somehow with the mysteries of the martial sphere, the sphere of the so-called war in heaven. Now, this search for balance is very important. The chart is all about this balance because not only we have it on a stellar level with the picture of the scale here, but we also have it on a more planetary level for two reasons. Now, first of all, the new moon falls on the midpoint between Venus and Mars, as we mentioned before. So we have this balance point between Mars and Venus, right? And on the other, we have the overall distribution of the planets in the chart that is forming a pentagram, right? Now, the shape of the pentagram can represent both Venus and Mars. That is both the rose and the thorns. And in this regard, we can refer to the orbit of Venus. So as you may know, Venus is basically tracing up in the sky the image of a cosmic rose that is quite beautiful. So from the Earth, Venus is basically tracing a pattern that resembles the image of a rose, which is quite beautiful. But on the other hand, we have the pentagram as the number 5, which refers to the fifth sphere, which is the sphere of Mars, or in a more Kabbalistic language, in a more Kabbalistic terms, the Sephirah of Gevurah. Now, the mysteries of the sphere of Mars are very, very complex, but the theme of their redemption belongs to a specific spiritual task entrusted to the figure of Gautama Buddha. So the Buddha sacrificed himself by entering this sphere. So in anthroposophy, we know very well this connection between the Buddha and the sphere of Mars. So how do we interpret this intervention? Basically, on a spiritual level, the redemption of the martial forces occurs through the development of the so-called chakra of Mars, which is the 16-petaled lotus flower of the throat. The throat chakra is the chakra of Mars. And in this regard, Rudolf Steiner updated Buddha's exercises for the development of the throat chakra that are the Eightfold Path. This is the way it is called. The Eightfold Path are 8 exercises to develop specifically this chakra that were donated by the Buddha. And Steiner basically made them more accessible and more suitable for us Westerners of our time. So my invitation to develop this spiritual impulse and transforming the sphere of Mars is, of course, to delve deeper into these exercises for the development of the 16-petaled lotus flower, which you can find in the text Knowledge of Higher Worlds by Rudolf Steiner. As always, thanks for watching. If you want to support my work, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, turn on the notification bell not to miss out on future astrological insights. I am Roberto Corona. See you in the next video.